Start due to technical issues. I'm Councillor Sarah Williams, I'm Chair of the committee, and
good evening. I'm Councillor Sheila Peacock, Councillor for Northumberland Park and Vice Chair of Planning.
I'm Councillor Peter Mitchell, Councillor for Woodside Ward.
Reg Race, Councillor for Tottenham Hill.
Councillor Yvonne Say from Bounds Green Ward.
Dhiren Basu from Seven Sisters Ward.
Councillor Viv Ross, Fortis Green Ward.
Councillor Liz Morris, Highgate Ward.
Councillor Luke Colley Harrison, Crouch End Ward.
thank you, councillors. And we also have officers present.
I'm Robin McKnocker, I'm Head of Development Management.
Conor Guilfoyle, Planning Officer.
Sorry, Legal Advisor.
We also have Fiona Ray clerking the meeting and we have
Richard Truscott, Design Officer.
Great, thanks everybody. When other officers who are joining us virtually, they'll introduce themselves to us as they speak. So this meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. The planning protocol is that members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda. And apologies have been received from Councillor Gina Adamu, and apologies for lateness, and she'll miss the first item from Councillor Amina Ibrahim. There's no items of urgent business. Do members have any declarations of interest? Yes, Councillor Say.
Yeah, as a Bounds Green councillor, I've attended site visits and officer briefings about the Partridge Way development.
Thank you. Any others? Yes.
Yes, I've been briefed by the owners of Highgate Care, who will be presenting this evening as a pre-app. As briefed as a local council.
Yeah, thank you. And then if you go to item 6 in the agenda pack, the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of July are there. Are those minutes agreed? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Chair. I presume you've also had an email from a Mr. Jack Grant who questions the accuracy of the minutes. That was on 7th of September. I just wonder if officers would care to comment on that.
Okay, would you care to comment on that?
I've not seen the email, but I have read the minutes and understand them to be a correct recording of the event.
Okay, well, it was addressed to the chair and the vice chair, and I had a copy of it as well. So I just.
Yeah. So our view is they're as approved by myself.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So are they approved? Agreed. Thank you. So we get on to the first substantive item, which is HGY 2021-2075, the land at the junction of Partridge Way and Trinity Road. So over to Mr. Guilfoyle, I think.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the redevelopment of the site, comprising 23 residential units for affordable rent. The application is part of the Council's agenda to provide affordable housing which meets an identified need in the borough. It comprises 23 flats, 14 one-beds and 9 two-beds, and all flats would be at 100% affordable rent. The additional housing would be provided through the reuse of redundant land and underutilised garages. The site is a small
Point
site.
of order, Chair.
I can't see it either, so. Is there anything we can do about the blurry screens? Tech help? I mean, I'm happy for for members to move closer to the screens if that is helpful for them. I think it might be more expedient if you can move closer to the screen. If we can just sharpen the image and members could move closer. Yeah? Does that work for people? It's better? If you can't see it at all, then, you know, move to the front, like at school. Is that all right? Okay, I want to continue, please. Thank you.
It's a small site, but it presents an opportunity to make a worthwhile contribution to affordable housing supply due to being capable of accommodating 23 units. The site lies within an established neighbourhood with good access to public transport connections and existing neighbourhood facilities. The site comprises two parts. The main part of the site is the garages on Partridge Way and the hard landscaping comprising paving slabs. The other part of the site is the green space to the northeast behind the houses on Partridge Way. There are two main neighbouring buildings to the north. These are the two 15-storey tower blocks of Finsbury House and Newbury House. To the south you have Trinity Road. To the west you have the junction with Partridge Road and Trinity Road and Bands Green Road beyond. And to the east you have the terrace grouping with number 2, Partridge Way, the first property next to the site. There are no notable planning designations, but there are 2 conservation areas in the wider surrounding. That includes Trinity Gardens and the Bowes Park conservation areas. This, excuse me, this slide shows the tower blocks on the left of the site. On the yellow marking on the bottom drawing, you can see the proposed application site. And on the top right, you can see number 2 Partridge Way marked out, which is the 2-storey terrace next to it. These photographs show the existing site. At the moment, you have bin stores which are unallocated at the front on the corner between the 2 junctions. You have the brick garages and you have the garage frontages on Partridge Way. Behind the garages, you can see the tower blocks, and to the side, next to the paving slab area, you have the edge of the gable end of number 2 Partridge Way. On the top right, you can see the green space, which will be the children's play area under this proposal. The application follows a design-led approach, which is supported by planning policy. It comprises high-quality design, which responds to the shape of the site and the street surrounding it. It underwent pre-application discussions and 2 quality review panels were undertaken. Throughout the design, the solution was to optimize the site to provide a best quality accommodation option. The height and proportions mediate between the taller buildings of the tower blocks and the 2-storey houses on the other side. The QRP review suggested amendments, and those amendments have been incorporated. In summary, they include improved security and access arrangements for the bicycle store, a new access to the gated side yard next to number 2, design changes to the first 2 stories. This comprises enlarged windows to improve the daylight to the first floor flat, and changing from dark grey brick to a lighter textured variety. The main issues which are detailed in the report comprise the principle of the development, design and appearance, landscaping and outdoor works, housing mix, tenure and quality of accommodation, the impact on neighbouring amenity, transport, parking, servicing, waste and recycling arrangements, and sustainability, energy and climate change aspects. This drawing shows the proposed site layout with the building next to number 2 Partridge Way and the play space marked out in red on the far right. It also shows a new bin store to replace the bins lost currently on site, which will be erected next to Finsbury House. Those bins would serve Finsbury House. This drawing shows the proposed ground floor layout and shows that the whole ground floor is given over to plant and servicing. The bin stores are on the bottom left. A very large cycle store is on the right-hand side. There are 2 lift shafts, and on the top right corner you can see the plant room. On this drawing as well, the bin store would have a separate access onto Partridge Way, and the cycle store and resident access would be through other doors. You can also see the gated entrance to the cycle store on the right-hand side, and that would be provided through the access passage to provide a double sense of security. On the first floor layout, you have 2 two-bedroom flats which comply and exceed with all relevant space standards. All flats have balconies. And then on the 2nd to 8th floor, you have the same design carrying forward. Again, all flats meet or exceed space standards. They all have triple aspect and they all have balconies. These drawings show the proposed elevations, particularly in the context of the taller buildings of Finsbury House and Newbury House. Again, the elevations are shown on these drawings, and in particular, the drawing on the bottom left shows the massing to gauge an understanding of the step down in height between the taller buildings and the shorter buildings. Here you can see some visualizations. One of the key features of the design following the QRP meeting was to incorporate a plinth on the ground floor and the first floor. That's marked out in red on the drawing. This features linear elements to respond to the height of the adjacent terrace houses and provide a visual continuity. This is articulated through vertical brickwork banding and vertical window alignments, and the upper floors differ in design to emphasize the difference between these elements. In terms of materials, a high-quality palette of materials is proposed, and this includes a buff-coloured stock brick. This brick was chosen following consultation with members who expressed a preference for a lighter tone from a dark grey which was originally presented to them. The materials respect the existing blocks, but also provide a textured contemporary appearance which is considered to reflect the variety of surrounding area where there is quite a large degree of difference between brick types and materials. The black metal balcony balustrades have been included and designed to provide a sense of screening and privacy without the need for additional informal, cluttered screening which could be attached in the future. Overall, the materials are considered to provide greater visual interest than the adjacent taller buildings behind them. In terms of amenity impacts, the separation distances would avoid harmful levels of overlooking and privacy loss between the future occupiers and the neighbouring occupiers. Daylight, sunlight, outlook, and sky levels will not be detrimentally impacted for future occupiers or neighbouring occupiers. The scheme incorporates slatted louvers on the balconies adjacent to number 2 Partridge Way, and the principle behind them is to deflect views away towards Barnes Green Road rather than into the immediate adjacent gardens. In terms of public transport, the site has a good public transport accessibility level of 5, which is very good access. It's next to bus routes on Barnes Green Road and underground stations at Barnes Green and Wood Green and nearby overground stations. The site lies within a controlled parking zone and the flats will be car-free. All flats would have cycle spaces for at least 2 cycles, and there will be a variety of cycling spaces and types provided. There would also be 2 accessible parking spaces for the 2 accessible flats on the upper floor. A parking stress survey was carried out to determine the capacity for displaced parking resulting from the loss of the garages. The overnight parking stress in the controlled parking zone showed a level of between 69 and 77%, which would rise to between 81 and 91% depending on how it's measured. Based on a worst case scenario, that would still provide a sufficient level of parking capacity on the streets, and in reality some of the lock-up garages may already be vacant or used for storage instead of car parking. As the flats would be car free and unable to obtain parking permits, this would address parking demand, and this also accounts for the fact that there would inevitably be some visitor parking and deliveries, etc., but this level of vehicle movement would be insufficient to harm the capacity on the streets. Some of the points to note in the addendum since the publication of the report are to do with access, servicing and waste. The Council's transportation and waste officers have finalised their assessment and concluded that bin trucks could manoeuvre on the street. The distance from the bin stores to the trucks will be acceptable and there will be no harmful impacts in this regard. London Fire Brigade and our Building Control Department have reviewed the application and raised no objection in terms of fire risk, with the application coming with a comprehensive fire assessment. Thames Water again have raised no objection, subject to a condition to ensure that no piling works take place without their approval beforehand. And in terms of landscaping, following discussions with members on site, concerns about maintenance were noted. The condition has been amended to ensure details of maintenance are set out in the management plan, and this needs to be complied with on an ongoing basis for future retention. In summary, the scheme provides 100% affordable housing at council rent of high quality design. In terms of land use, it is acceptable and reflects and responds to the character of the area. The standard of accommodation is very good. They have generous layouts and sizes. They meet or exceed all relevant space standards. The units are triple aspect. They have excellent daylight and outlook, generous internal layouts, generous accessible flat sizes, excellent amenity provision and child space provision. In terms of flood risk, the site lies in the lowest risk zone, which is 1, and it also incorporates sustainable drainage systems, which a condition secures details of. In terms of other matters, the crime potential, air quality, ecology and land contamination issues are all standard. There's no unusual issues identified and planning conditions have been imposed to manage these. In terms of sustainability, the scheme represents an exemplar building, particularly for new affordable housing stock. It considerably exceeds expected CO2 savings for typical new builds and considerably exceeds minimum building regulation standards. Here you can see a visual summary of the proposal in the context of the surrounding streets. And in conclusion, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to an agreement and subject to planning conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do members have any clarification questions for Mr. Guilfoyle? I'll start with Councillor Mitchell and then I've got Councillor Rice.
Well, if you're also including at this stage some clarifications on the report from officers. Yes, okay. On page 8, could you just clarify paragraph 2.1 about the timescale on the consultation and the reference to the 23rd of September? I mean, I noted online that it says the consultation was extended until the 3rd of September, which is obviously past. Nonetheless, it still says it's open for comments. So could you just clarify that, please? And then also on page 8, the 4th bullet point down, it says the scheme is supported by sustainable transport initiatives. I'm not clear what those are. A couple more points. On page 36, paragraph 6.103, it says the Council's Conservation Officer has reviewed the proposal and notes that it would have an impact on the significance of the Wood Green Common Conservation Area. I think the word "not" is missed out there, because if you look on page 113, 114, it seems that there was not a concern about the impact on the conservation area, but if you could just clarify that. And on page 56, which sets out what we will be voting on later. On number 17, it should say 23 residential units, not 8. They're all going to be at council rent. Sorry, one more point. On page 33 at the top, it says that there is an acoustic report, which concludes that appropriate internal and external noise levels can be achieved. Well, clearly you can control the internal noise by way of types of window, and I know it refers to being able to have the windows closed, but still an appropriate air circulation. But I mean, we clearly can't control the external noise level from the traffic predominantly. So I'm not sure what that was getting at. I mean, clearly they've got balconies and they will be exposed to noise, but there's surely nothing much we can do about that. Just, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. I don't know who wants to take which. No?
Yep. I'll just go first on the notice. Thank you, Chair. In this instance, we have had to notify in a number of ways through letters, site notices and a press notice. There was an administrative error that meant the press notice wasn't published in time, along with the letters and the site notices going up. So that consultation is still running at the moment and ends on the 23rd of September. So if any material objections come up in that time, we would have to consider those and see whether that materially influences the decision. But if not, then we'll proceed to issue the permission.
This is travel question was the next point, I think.
Yeah, on sustainable travel, those are the inclusion of bike stores and the limitation on parking would be brought under that umbrella of promoting sustainable travel measures.
In terms of the conservation area impact, you're quite right in pointing out that that should be not. To answer your further question on the external and internal noise, like you point out, what's referred to in the report is when you're sat externally on the balconies. The report may not have been clear on that, but that means users sat on the balcony space as opposed to inside the flats.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly we can't do anything about the noise that residents will be exposed to if they're sitting outside on the balcony.
That's correct. The noise assessment nonetheless takes account of noise impacts for the whole unit. So it takes account of people inside the properties, but also it also takes account of what people would experience sat out on the balconies to justify whether or not the balconies would be worthwhile as amenity spaces.
The 23 versus 8. Yeah.
Yes, that's also a typo.
Okay. Thank you. I think that was them all, was it, Councillor Mitchell? Yeah. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, at page 134, there's the recording of the committee minutes who did the pre-application consideration. My concern about this development is that it is far too tall and the present residents of the various tower blocks around there, vision would be completely obscured by this development. The vision that they've had for a whole number of years, I think those flats have been there for the 50s, would just disappear. It's far too tall. Could you just remind me how tall these are again, please?
The building would be 9 stories tall. 9
floors, and the current one's 11, isn't it?
Pardon?
The current blocks are 11 stories, aren't they?
The 2 adjacent blocks are 15 stories.
I can't hear you. Can you speak up a bit, please?
The 2 adjacent blocks are 15 stories.
The 2 adjacent blocks are?
15.
15. And these are 11, you said?
This building is 9 stories.
9 stories.
Yes.
Far too many stories. That's the point I'm trying to make. And if you look at page 134, where the community were consulted on the proposal, what did it say? It said the blocks are far too tall. So if we can have consultation, then you have to reflect that in your approach to the subject. So what's the approach to the concern of residents that the buildings are far too tall?
Mr. Guilfoyle, could you?
The design approach is set out in a report, but essentially we have planning policies which ask us to develop these sites at higher density now. And the reason for that is housing demand. When there is a context like this where you have greater spacing around the site and you have taller buildings on one side, it is considered that that scale could be accommodated.
There's not tall buildings to one side.
Hang on, it's not just a conversation, Councillor Rice, it's a question and an answer. I think that's... Are there any further questions, Councillor Rice?
I want my question answered, because he says that there's no tall buildings around there, but there is.
Yeah, not liking the answer isn't the same as not having an answer.
Sorry?
I think you were given an answer to your question.
What's wrong with that top table? I can't hear what's going on there.
Sorry, I'll try and speak more into the mic for you.
That's better.
Okay. Is there a different question you have, Councillor Rice? Because I think that question was answered.
Well, I didn't like the answer, to be honest.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I've got quite a few questions. So do you want me to take them one by one or all in one go?
Oh, I think all in one go works quite well, thanks.
Okay, so the first one, page 24 and page 38, talks about cycle stores. Some of the members of this committee went to 2 site visits, one to the warehouse living area and one to Clarendon on Friday. And it was noticeable that the people in the warehouse area don't keep their cycles in the cycle store there. They keep them in their own homes because they said the security was not that good in cycle stores. I also noticed that Clarendon, lots of people were keeping their cycles on their balconies rather than using the cycle stores. And I just wondered if anyone's thought, I don't know if this might have to go to planning, strategic planning committee, some sort of report on the use of cycle stores, because some cycles nowadays are extremely expensive. You can be talking thousands of pounds, and people just don't use cycle stores if they've got an expensive bike. So I just wondered if it's obviously not something for this particular planning application, because this will either be agreed or not tonight. But I just wondered if some sort of report could go to strategic planning about the use of cycle stores, bearing in mind that we're also talking about police designing in or designing out crime, that sort of thing. My second question is on the play facilities, page 27. Right at the bottom there, the new space to the side of this new building will be used for children's play facilities, and it talks about 10.10 square metres per child, and yet this will be an open play facility that all the other houses and indeed the flats in the 2 blocks will be able to use. And I wonder if, is that figure of 10.10 square metres just the people who will be living in this new block, or is it taken into account other members of the public using the play area? Because lots of the times we talk about play facilities, they're actually enclosed within sites rather than being open to the public, as this one will. My next question is about on page 30, and 6.68 talks about wheelchair units, and it's been brought to my attention that lots of buildings are built nowadays with insufficient strength in the joists for people to use in wheelchairs, for people to use joists sorry, not joists, hoists to get in and out of bed, that sort of thing. And I just wondered, again, this might be something that needs to go to strategic planning about whether or not the strength of joists where hoists are concerned are taken into account. Next question is over the page. Sorry, page 43. Talks about low potential. This is on 6.146, last para. Low potential for significant invertebrate assemblages, and the and it's talking about biodiversity, that sort of thing. And it's going to be a child's play area. And yet on page 98, second para down, it talks about installation of bird and bat boxes. Just wondered why, if it's a child's play area and such a small space, we're even bothering to put bird and bat boxes in there. Next question is page 84. Talks about just above the last paragraph, visitors to future residents will still be able to apply for visitor vouchers to park. My experience of CPZs is that if you live somewhere where it's a CPZ, a random visitor who might just want to pop round can't actually apply for a CPZ if the people who live in the flats can't apply for vouchers for CPZs. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And my last question is for clarification. On page 91, and again over the page, bottom paragraph, talks about a reduction of 64% carbon dioxide emissions. But there are garages there at the moment. How can that be a reduction in carbon emissions? Can someone explain that, please? That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
So the 2 points you made about strategic planning committee, I'll make a note of those and we will bring those too. Although I would imagine it's within the policy that they are strengthened, but let's get confirmation of that now. Yeah. Would you mind starting with the wheelchair and the joist hoist situation?
Yes. The wheelchair, I understand your point about the hoist. Essentially, we're going into building regulation territory here. The planning application requirements require more for adaptability and suitability for manoeuvring, but when it comes to physical aspects of the development in terms of strengths and how it's built, we would be crossing over into the building regulation side of things, which they would still need to comply with, but it's just a separate regime.
So maybe if a report about that could come to strategic planning. Thank you. Definitely.
Just to go back to your first question about the cycle stores. Yes, I understand your point. On any residential development, what we do is try and secure the best type of cycle storage. And the key point is that it's secure and weatherproof. On this scheme, unlike many housing schemes which have cycle stores which are directly accessed off the street, the design was changed. So the passage from Trinity Road into the gap between the building and number 2 will have a gate, and residents will only have access to that gate. Once you enter that gate, you have the side access, and then you have a second door into the building, and from there you will access the cycle store. This was reviewed with the quality review panel and the secure by design officer, and is the safest route in terms of having secure cycle storage. Ultimately, we can't prevent people from putting cycles on their balconies unless there's a leasehold prevention for that. But in terms of encouraging cycle use, this would be considered the most secure, the most optimum design we could have. And in addition, we have a variety of cycle measures to secure the cycles inside that room. So there's flexibility. So the key idea is to encourage use and remove any barriers. And the proposed details here are considered excellent in terms of their design quality and security.
If I may, Chair, I think the point I'm making is if we're building cycle stores and yet residents aren't using them, it's a pointless exercise.
Are you suggesting we don't build cycle stores? I
No,
think
I'm
not.
suggesting we get some sort of report coming to strategic planning.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a good idea. Yeah. There was a carbon question, I think.
Yes. In terms of the carbon question, what the reference is it's referring to the level of reduction for new builds over and above the level required by building regulations. So it's not referring to the embedded carbon in the existing garages, so that isn't taken into account. If I could just also answer your question on play facilities, the figure you referred to, the 10.4, just to clarify, that is just for the new building. You're quite right in pointing out that the intention here is to make this a facility for all in the neighbourhood. The scheme has been deliberately designed to focus that child space towards younger members up to about 11 years old. And the logic for that is that older teenagers can cross the road to the park or other sports facilities in the area. So we decided to focus on quality rather than quantity here. And the provision that is provided still exceeds the standard required by planning policy.
Okay, thank you. Well, Madam Chair, that leads into why are we putting back boxes and bird boxes in what's going to be a child play area?
They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Planning policy asks us to improve biodiversity and ecological aspects of any development. Policy is becoming stricter and more stringent, so we should always have some measures to improve what's already there. But yes, these are small measures. They're not necessarily trying to compete with the play space.
Okay, thanks. We've got quite a few objectors want to speak and ask questions as well. I don't know. We've got lots more. So I saw Luke, Councillor Corley-Harrison is indicating.
Chair, my question about CPZs and visitors.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not able to answer that question in terms of parking permit eligibility for visitors.
I can. You can get them. It actually causes some issues in some developments. There's so many visitors permits given out that they're used to park cars permanently. So that is something that's currently being looked at, as I understand it. But I think this is correct as policy now. Okay, is my understanding. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. One of the conditions is development start no later than 3 years. Just wondering if officers would object to that being 2 years. I don't see why it needs to be 3 years. If it does, then if you could let me know. On page 11, it refers to the carbon offset contribution, which is about 30k. And then in one of the further pages, I think maybe 40 or 24, it refers to how this contributes to getting to net zero, but I don't understand how paying some money into a pot in the council somewhere gets us anywhere close to net zero for carbon, even if it might on the balance sheet. So where's that money go to, and how are we getting to net zero by paying for it? On page 24 in the QRP's comments, it refers to the courtyard area, and how it needs to be carefully considered to avoid the prospect of becoming an informal residence waste storage area. To me, it looks like from the maps 2 yards. I know one is designated as a cycle repair and cleaning area, and the other, well, I couldn't really work out what the other was. So what is being done to prevent that just becoming a bit of a dumping ground and a waste ground, other than it being a sort of a thoroughfare? What has changed from those QRP comments? Page 40 was where we talk about zero carbon, if you need to reference it. And then page 66. Oh yeah, page 66. So the top right corner, it's described as a landscaped area, but it looks the same as the middle area, which looks like a paved area. And there doesn't really look to be much green space on site, so to speak. I know there's the children's play area. So if you could just, I suppose, just describe what that outdoor area is. And then also on the cycle store situation, it doesn't sound like a lot of visitors stores just to have 2 Sheffield stands outside. So what's that figure based on? And I very much welcome the mobility scooter stores, not something I think I've seen other applicants do. So if you can encourage that, that would be great. But all the other spaces are for single unit bikes rather than adapted bikes or cargo bikes. So I'm wondering what provision there would be to introduce them. And then just on, it's more of a point really, page 76. I've never seen Bounds Green Road looking like that, I have to say, with the amount of trees there. I mean, it's hardly a forest, is it? So I think if we're doing visuals, let's at least make it representative of what the area is or is even going to look like, because if that tree there is the proposed tree, it's not going to look like that for 40 or 50 years. I think the visual, which is supposed to represent winter, which is on page 78, probably better represents summer, actually, along that road. And it's quite important because page 76, obviously the trees mask the existing buildings, whereas the reality is if you're standing on the road, they're very, very evident. So perhaps that's just a point for future reports. Thanks.
Shall I start on the, thank you, Chair. Yes, on the 2-year permission, we've attached the standard 3-year condition as we always do. There's been no reason to attach any shorter period, but you're welcome to put that to the applicant and raise that as an amendment. I'm just going to bring in Rob Szosowski on the carbon offsetting and how that's used.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Szosowski, the Assistant Director.
Can't hear you yet.
Standards and Sustainability. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rob Szosowski, the Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability. Just on carbon offset points, the Section 106 monies for carbon offset going to the bottom of our Cabinet recently approved the Carbon Offset Community Fund, which is used to spend carbon offset monies to work towards net zero, and that was in July 2021. And in July 2020, the Affordable Energy Strategy approved by planning as well, to also contribute spending funds towards net zero. So I hope that helps answer that question. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure it did help too much because the sound quality was very poor here. I think I caught that there's a carbon offset community fund. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Could you?
Sorry, I think in short, the money that's taken is spent on mitigation measures off-site for carbon offsetting, so solar panels on schools, things like that. And yes, we'll think about a report to Strategic Committee just outlining some of what Rob has said there.
So the green space and the awkwardly sized cycles. Sure.
Yeah, if I could just bring in Stefan Putzik, who's our transportation officer, just to answer that, hopefully, if his sound's working.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Chair. Sorry, could you repeat the question? Didn't get it.
The question is regarding how do we actually, Councillor Colin Harrison, do you want to ask that bit of your question again? Might be the easiest.
Yep. So it was on what basis has the number of the 2 visitor Sheffield stands been decided? Because it's quite a low number. And would there be provision for larger bikes, such as cargo bikes, within the store if it needed to be reconfigured to allow for them?
Okay, so the 2 short stay visitor cycle parking spaces are based on the London Plan policy, which requires a minimum of 2 spaces for residential developments between 5 and 40 dwellings. So because the proposals are for 23 units, we are meeting the minimum standards of 2. Regarding your question about space to accommodate larger cycles, this is possible with Sheffield stands within the cycle store.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Say.
Yeah, can I?
Sorry, just on the courtyard space. Didn't get an answer on that one.
Yes.
Courtyard space.
The courtyard would be secured by a locked gate, as you can see on the drawings, towards the front near Trinity Road. The issue raised at QRP was without the cycle store entering onto that passage as previously proposed, it would effectively become an unused space, and there was the risk that it would become an area for fly tipping or dumping and so forth. So by providing the cycle store through that passage, you have the security benefit for the cycle users of an additional door, but you also have the you also have the active surveillance of users passing through, which is likely to prevent its use as a dumping ground effectively. There is a hard and soft landscaping plan which asks for those details, all the details to be approved. So those details have yet to be finalised, but essentially we're talking about having gates sealing off the passage at either end and users regularly passing through to prevent that arising.
Sorry, it was actually the space in the top right, which I don't think you pass through for the cycle store, which is kind of a triangular.
I see, yes.
It's called landscaped area.
Those details haven't yet been confirmed at the planning application stage, so the landscaping condition will pick up on them.
Thank you. And now over to Councillor Say.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really. I actually quite like the design. I'm impressed with the flats and so on. What does worry me, I'm the same with Councillor Rice, is the height of it. And I think that the policy you're quoting is a bit of flawed thinking. Just because you've got high density blocks there already doesn't mean you want to squash even more people in there. So I'd much prefer to see it about 6 stories.
The policy doesn't necessarily say because we have high density blocks there already, that's what's proposed here. It's actually the other way around. It's saying because of the housing shortage in London and the need to accommodate housing on small infill brownfield sites like these, we should be aiming for much denser development than was the norm in the past as a solution to accommodating the housing demand. So the policy says we should do that, but as a design-led approach, and design of course is subjective, but for the reasons set out in the report, we consider that the scale here, while tall, could be accommodated on this site.
Thank you. Hopefully that's all the questions at this stage, and we can go over. We have actually 3 objectors this evening. The protocol allows for 2, an additional at my discretion, so we have 3. So who's going first? Mr. Grant. So you have 3 minutes to speak. And I suggest we hear all 3 objectors in a row before we take any questions. Thanks. So make a note of them if you've got any. Thanks.
So I'm going to quote from the pre-application consultation. Finally, for the objections you may receive, my fear is they will not even be taken into consideration as Haringey Council do what they want no matter how residents feel. 28 consultation responses, 26 negative, 0 in favour. 800 addresses contacted, 9 people responded in person. 90 online responses, but the report remains unclear how many actual individuals responded, but it's likely that the report had more pages than actual residents consulted. The concerns that the people have aren't addressed. Something as simple as the repeatedly asked, where are the bins going, is not answered by community involvement. And to give you one example out of the 90, careful consideration to ensure light levels are not adversely affected. But was a response. But the sunlight and daylight assessment does not bear that out. It says that its impact doesn't break the legal minimums. There are domestic windows that are losing 62% of their light. There are playground windows losing 44% of their light. The school playground is losing 15% of its space, which will drop below 2 hours of light on the 21st of March. So just imagine how dark that playground will be in January and in December. You know, I read the economic assessment, and I don't think it included the seasonal affective disorder lamps you will have to buy for those children. And I think that's the core point here, is what other council department would be allowed to act like this? I spoke to the regeneration team about the school streets, and they said, the consultations so far are 50-50, so we're unsure if that's going ahead. That's a way to consult your residents. Council-led housing is something to be really, really proud of, because it will be something that will define Tottenham for generations. But if you allow the housing development team to behave like every other developer, those housing developments will come out like every other development. That was all I had to say on the matter, but could I also separately, I don't want to take up other people's time, but can I raise a point of order? On the planning subcommittee agenda item 7, it lays out the protocol for hearing representation, and it shows that representations will be heard from people who disagree with the recommendation of the officers, but I've been told that the applicants will be given equal time to the objectors. So it's agenda item 7, planning applications. That's the subcommittee protocol for hearing representations. I just wanted a point of order on why that was happening. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this on already?
Hang on, don't start yet. Thank you. On your point of order, we'll hear from Mr. Telepner.
Yeah, just on the point about the right to respond, if there's one objector, that would be 3 minutes, and then the applicant will have an equal amount of time. That is the council's protocol on that.
Yeah.
Chair. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor Rice.
Chair, is it in order for an observer of the meeting to raise a point of order?
I'm not too sure. That's why
the points of order reserved for committee members, not observers.
I think so. I think so. Yes. Okay. Okay, Mr. Grant. We need to take that out. Thank you. No.
Come on.
Yeah, we don't. We're just talking about that. It's fine. Okay. So, Mr. Burnham, you have 3 minutes when you're ready, please.
Is this device already working? It sounds like it is. Okay. Good evening. It's Paul Burnham from Partridge Way here. Looking at the material planning considerations relevant to this proposal, firstly, the visual impact of placing housing blocks so close together will be problematic. 9-storey block would be only 15 metres away from the 15-storey Finsbury House. This would create a forbidding outlook to the Partridge Way estates when approached from its only road entrance on Bounds Green Road. As pointed out by Councillor Corley-Harrison, absolutely right. The depiction of this in the document is completely ludicrous. And this approach to the estate is completely incompatible with the typology of the surrounding area, which primarily consists of houses built before 1939. Secondly, overlooking would be an issue in several different directions, but especially from Finsbury House to the new building and from the new building to Finsbury House. Privacy is a major quality of life issue, and this scheme fails badly on it. The limitation of and potential intrusion into people's personal space should be avoided wherever possible. So please reconsider on this one as well. Thirdly, loss of light. The new building would be inappropriately situated directly south of two other tower blocks and also south of the play cabin. The new big boy would inevitably deny light to the users of these buildings. So looking at the vertical sky component, windows of flats on the first and second floors in Newbury House would lose 20% of their natural light. On loss of sunlight hours, it's bad news again for both the existing blocks of flats and also the window to the playroom at the play cabin would lose 18% of its total sunlight hours and 38% of its winter sunlight hours. It's not acceptable to hide behind the absurdly lax BRE standards to pass such serious detriments onto residents, when the obvious alternative is to reconsider the height of the building. In conclusion, I hope committee members will question some of the advice that you're reading in the report today. Super dense housing developments are not necessarily good for future residents. The council also needs to be fairer to existing council estate residents where new house building is being proposed. At Partridge Way, vehicle parking management has been effectively absent for years on end, as other objectors have pointed out. Long overdue external decorations to the tower blocks were cancelled without notice last year, and the frontage of Newbury House, where I live, is a disgrace to this council. And unfortunately, this is a pattern that goes on elsewhere in the borough. Just like at Love Lane in Tottenham, as an example, we would like you to treat people with more respect than you have been doing until now. So please send this proposal back and think again. I'll just make a final point, if I may, which is that I can't see how this committee can make a decision this evening while the consultation period is still running. There are certainly issues triggered off in my head because of the discussions this evening, and I may well want to go home. People watching the webcast may well want to make additional representations. You cannot decide until you have ended the period when people have an opportunity to respond, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and within time. Next objector to speak, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, is Walgan Gritch. Thank you.
Right, I've just got points here. I'm objecting to the height and space, the closeness and overshadowing. Sorry, I live at 34 Finsbury House, 6th floor. And overshadowing makes the whole planning application unreasonable. The scale of works will be unbearable. Loss of privacy, loss of light, loss of peace, and just 14 meters from Finsbury House. All this will be affected by the scale, position, and height of the proposed building, and not as you falsely stated. Loss of parking, I'm not sure about that. We are already short of spaces, and this will be a disaster for all the surrounding areas. Motorbike parking spaces is never mentioned. I ride a motorbike. It will take approximately 2 years to complete, and you can't provide answers to where the additional spaces will be on top of those that probably will be lost. Bulk storage, question mark. Quality of life diminished, as this is a very small site for a 9-story block, with periods of intrusion being so close to Finsbury House and being overbuilt so close to the main road, and all that chaos that will follow. More social problems, drug abuse, nothing has been taken into account. Your proposal states that the building is designed to respect the scale and character of the surrounding urban area. This isn't true. This proposed building looks like an office block or a prison. The design is ugly and does not blend in, making false claims. I am adversely affected, and not as you claim. My whole view to the east of my balcony and living room is gone forever. I will have less lighting in my property. I will have loss of value to my property, and so will all other leaseholders. I won't be able to park, I won't have bulk storage, my privacy and peace will be lost for good. I can't believe that you have taken a lot, of consideration into this planning application. There has been false claims and you don't know the answers to the chaos that is about to begin. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Quelch. Do we have any questions to the objectors? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Burnham. I don't know if he wants to go to the mic. Thanks.
I think we're back on. Good to go? Great. Any more questions for any of the objectors? Councillor Mitchell. Just the question or the question and the answer? Okay. Take two, please, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Well, if I remember it properly. One of your objections was in regards to the height of the building, scale and massing. A reduction in height would be a reduction in the number of homes offered, number of council homes. So would your preference be to reduce the scale and massing? And when you say return to the design stage, or would it be to remove the proposals for this site and look at a completely different development?
Right, I think that different objectors would have different approaches to that question, because there are a range of different problems with what's being proposed. I personally would support development of new council homes on the estate. I think that the number of homes being placed on that particular corner, which is a very small area, is too many, and I think that the design that's been put forward is completely unacceptable. So the overlook is completely unacceptable. What it does to the approach to the estate from Bounds Green Road is completely unacceptable. And the denial of light is completely unacceptable. These are three obvious blunders that have been made. So building new council homes, I'm all in favour of it. I'm strongly campaigning in favour of that. But we have to think about how we do it more than is being thought at the moment, to be honest.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Councillor Mitchell.
Could I ask Mr. Burnham to clarify what he said about lapsed BRE standards? I think that's what you said, given that the report generally says that it meets BRE standards apart from some limited non-compliance on vertical sky component. Thanks.
Yeah, what I'd say about that is that the BRE standards allow proposals to go through that build buildings that deny light to people which they're reasonably entitled to. And we've seen that at the Elizabeth Place Park site in mid-Tottenham. When you read the report, you have a tall building being built in a place, which means a child play space is going to be denied light. And that is just wrong. And that is the same argument is put forward. It meets the BRE standards because it doesn't deny light under every situation all the time. But when we look at the report that's presented here, as two of us have pointed out, there are substantial losses of light, substantial detriments to people who are residents and who are users of the play scheme. It's up to you to decide whether that's appropriate. We think it's not appropriate, and we think that people ought to have their rights to light more protected than they are in this proposal.
Thank you. There's no further questions. I'd like to move over to the applicant team now. Thank you, Mr. Burnham, for your response. So you have up to 9 minutes. Got Ishan Stewart Dowding, Christian Pinchin and Martin Cowie. So you can split the 9 minutes as you see fit. Thank you. When you're ready.
Good evening. My name's Christian Pinchin from Pinchin Architects, and I'm here to speak in support of the scheme at Partridge Way. We're making use of an underused site in a highly accessible location. The unique position of the site on the junction of 3 roads leads to wide surrounding infrastructure and the opportunity for a tall building that respects its context and relationships with its neighbours. The building has been through the QRP and pre-application process, and the resultant design has absorbed and evolved from all of the advice given. The scheme has been widely consulted with stakeholders and the local community via a programme of community engagement. All comments have been dealt with in terms of addressing major concerns through design, further clarifications, and consultant information and reports. It is our view, therefore, that the building presented is the best solution for the brief, which is to make effective use of a tight brownfield site whilst respecting its context. We believe that 3 units per floor is the right number of units to allow for efficient land use and optimum net to gross use of floor space. The shape of the site has resulted in a unique triangular form that responds specifically to the site constraints. And with the chamfered corners, we're creating a modern and unique response that allows us to direct overlooking away from adjacent properties. We believe that 9 stories is the right height to extrude this 3-unit floor plate. 9 stories makes the building look elegant. It elongates the chamfered corners and allows the building to maintain its position against Newby and Finsbury House without competing with them. We've used modern materials that work with the distinctive form and height so that we layer the facades with visually interesting brickwork and black aluminium windows and doors that add depth and contrast to the elevations. The brick that we have chosen is a modern stock brick that uses a buff-coloured textured base and then applies white and dark grey firing marks to give a multi-layered facing material that provides visual interest. We do not want to emulate the poor quality yellow brick of the tower blocks, as this brick is flat and provides no texture or tonal change. We also felt that a red brick was wrong, as it would appear incongruous against Finsbury and Newbury House, and would always remain distant and unconnected from the red brick Victorian properties on the south side of Bounds Green Road. Our brick therefore mediates between the typical London stock bricks of the Bowes Park conservation area and more unusual elements within the conservation areas, like the flint facade of the Bramer Avenue Church and the white slate-top tower of St Barnabas's Church. It does this while still remaining true to the design concept for the scheme. The unusual triangular form is modern in nature, and it needs a brick that is of its time to unify and consolidate that concept. Our building design is further reinforced by multi-layered brickwork detailing. We have recessed balconies, a two-storey plinth capped with a triple stacked brick header, which caps the lower floors, and the two-storey main entrance. We have recessed brick panels adjacent to windows, which create a rhythm of shadows over the elevations, creating relief and interest. Projecting brick ribs unify the plinth that aligns with the adjacent low-rise housing. A subtle horizontality is added to the top of the punch window openings as the triple stacked brick header is used to add definition. The absence of this header in some locations also creates a vertical framing that reinforces the frame balconies and again elongates the elevations. We believe that this design is the best solution for the site and the brief in terms of delivering an optimal number of units. In addition, this provides a 64% CO2 reduction with a highly energy efficient building. It complies with all guidance and policies. It respects its neighbours and context, and most importantly, provides 23 high quality affordable units. In terms of responding to some of the questions directly, there was a question about hoists and disabled access from one of the councillors. This would be a reinforced concrete frame building, and so there would be inherent strength within the structure to support any of those hoists in any given position. There was also a question about the side yard and the secure gates, and whether this may become a dumping ground. And there would be secure gates with key fob access and also CCTV. And as Conor rightly said, there would also be naturally policed by people using the building. And the triangle to the top that one of the councillors was referring to is actually access to a plant area. So again, that would be security controlled. In terms of the questions and concerns about sunlight and daylight, this building has been extensively analysed using the BRE guidance, and I appreciate people's concerns, but it has been through all of those considerations and passes in all respects. There are some impacts, but on balance it accords with the regulations, which is what we're working towards. I have no further points unless anybody wants to add to that.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant team? Councillor Rice.
Can you hear me? I just wondered why there are 9 floors rather than, say, for instance, 6 floors. Why is 9 so sacred? Because 9 does a lot of things that a few less floors would not do.
It's a good question. We felt that 9 created a slim profile, especially when viewed from Bounds Green Road. When the building is taken down to 6, and we did look at this and analyse it, it actually looks quite squat and blocky. And we felt that, you know, there's nothing sacrosanct about 9 particularly. It just seemed to be right. The proportions of the building seemed to work well at that level. And it's our professional opinion that that's just the best overall effect that we could create there, as well as creating an optimum number of social housing units.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. There was quite a lot of talk by the objectors about impinging on daylight, sunlight, and overlooking of the, I think it was mainly the tower blocks and the playground. So I'm hoping that you can comment on that, because it does refer to some degree of non-compliance with the BRE criteria. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's very, very rare to have a building within London that doesn't have any impact on its neighbours. You know, we are talking about relatively close proximities, and there is always some effect, and it's assessing the level of that effect that, you know, is everyone's job here tonight, I think. But yeah, you know, this has been, you know, this has gone through detailed analysis, and according to the professional report we've had commissioned by Rights of Light Consulting, it does comply with the guidance. But there is some impact, that is true. In terms of the overlooking, this building's been designed so that as many habitable rooms as possible look south. Some of them look east and west. Very few habitable rooms look north. So in terms of, you know, an overlooking impact as caused by the new accommodation, we've worked as hard as we can to limit that. There is the occasional bedroom that does look north, but in the main, the primary habitable rooms sort of look away from the tower blocks to the rear. Yeah, they're angled, the sort of chamfered balconies are angled away.
Thank you. Was there another one there? Okay.
Well, it's just a follow up. You said that there was some impact on the daylight and sunlight. I was wondering whether you could tell us exactly where that would be, what units we're talking about, or are we talking about the playground, what types of rooms they are, as far as you understand?
It's probably too detailed to give you a full answer on that. There was, you know, multiple windows tested with varying degrees of effect using different daylight conditions, whether it's sunlight or vertical sky components. So it's very difficult to give you a simple answer to that. But it's a small proportion that are significantly affected when you consider them in the round.
Thank you. Any further questions? I think we do need to move to a decision fairly soon. There are no further questions. So we have the recommendation in front of us. Are there any other informatives or conditions? Could you sum up, please?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Mitchell quite rightly pointed out, there was an error in condition 17 that should read, notwithstanding any provisions to the contrary, the 23 residential units hereby approved shall be for rent at council social rent. So that should form part of the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Ross.
Councillor Corley-Harrison mentioned reducing to 2 years the on-site. I wonder if someone could comment on that.
I think that was, yeah, that's the applicant team.
That's fine.
Yes. They're in agreement with that, so.
Yes. We can also then change condition 1 to read 2 years instead of 3.
Yeah. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Yeah, can we add in addition to condition 26 for no satellite dishes?
Is that an homage to past members of the committee?
Well, you know, there is another meeting taking place tonight they might be at.
Yes, we'll attach our standard satellite dish condition on top of that. I think it'll probably just be an additional condition 28.
Councillor Morris, did you indicate that?
Yeah, thank you. Just because the consultation is still open, can you explain what will happen if there are further objections which could affect the decision? What's the process?
I can comment on this as well. Yeah. Here's the legal advice on that.
Yeah, so just to say that if any further objections are made which haven't been considered and addressed tonight, then wouldn't be advisable for permission to be issued under that circumstances. Those objections should be considered at a new committee date for this application. Essentially, the application would need to be reheard, and those objections should be taken into account.
Thank you. No, we've just had the legal advice on that. Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Well, just to point out that in the addendum, there are some changes to a couple of the conditions, so presumably we are incorporating those. So page 4 of the addendum, condition 6, and condition 2. On page 5, well, I think it should say condition 4, details of hard and soft landscaping, but there are those amendments which we're incorporating,
Yes, that's correct. And yes, so the satellite dish condition will then follow subsequent numbers of those. I think it'll be condition 30 probably. But yes, you're right, that does form part of the recommendation to the committee.
Councillor Rice.
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it appears to me what's been said so far is that there's consultation still going on in respect of this development. And would it not make logical sense not to proceed to vote on the development tonight, but to wait until we got the outcome of those consultations and include in any recommendations committee suggestions that could emerge from the consultation process?
Should I take that? Or are you going to take that?
I think you would need a motion to defer in that case to the consultation to end, but that's not the recommendation before you.
Yeah, we've added a condition to reduce the time to 2 years from 3.
Chair, if it requires a motion that this motion be not put tonight, then I propose that motion.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? So what is the motion? Sorry? Exactly. Is to defer this decision. Is that the motion you're putting?
Until we are aware of the outcome of the further consultation. It makes absolute logical sense. It doesn't make any sense to take a decision now and probably have to come back in 6 weeks' time when some adverse
well, okay, you've moved a motion, so I don't think there's any point in discussing, but it was if there was any material objections different to all the objections we've heard tonight. It would only be that in that instance, but it seems you've moved a motion. We will have to take a vote on that motion. So the motion is on the table to defer. All those in favour of that motion, if they could show. And all those against? Okay. Where's our clock gone?
Sorry?
It was. Councillor Say seconded it. Do you want me to start the vote from the beginning again, or did you get that? From the beginning. So all those in favour of deferring, please show now. All those against deferring, show now. And abstentions. So that motion falls. So now we have the substantive motion before you.
What was the vote, Chair?
Don't know.
Sorry? Can't hear you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. 451. 4, 4, 5 against, 1 abstention. So now we have the recommendation before you to grant subject to the informatives and conditions as outlined by Mr. McKnocker and in the documentation. I see all those in favour of the development. Great. And all those against? And any abstentions? Technically speaking, Councillor Burnham, I don't think you could vote because you weren't here for the whole item. So actually, I needn't have recorded that. Yes, I know. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the applicant team, and thank you, objectors, for coming to speak to us this evening.
Vote, Chair?
6-3, and the one doesn't count. Yeah. So we move on. We move on to pre-app briefings. So item 10, Merrifield and Guild Care Home, 103 to 107 North Hill. We've got Mr. McRory to introduce the report, I think.
Yes, hello Chair, hello members. I think just whilst the developer team are...
Could you start again, please, Mr. McRory? We didn't hear you to start with.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, got you. Thanks.
Okay. Just while the developer team set up their presentation, I'm just going to briefly introduce this Chair. Officers have been in pre-application discussions with the developer team for the redevelopment of the Merrifield Guild site to demolish the existing building and construct a new building to be used as a care facility. The building currently on site is vacant and was previously a care home. The planning consultant will be running through the scheme in some depth in his presentation, which will follow my introduction. The scheme has been presented to the quality review panel twice, and the panel members are generally supportive of the scheme. The latest QRP comments are attached to members' addendum. Officers are generally supportive of the scheme also, subject to further work on detailed design of the building. Members should note that the site is in the Highgate Conservation Area and is next to a statutory list of building. Again, this will be highlighted in the presentation. The scheme is now at a stage where it can be presented to members for feedback, and I will hand over to the applicant's agent who will present the scheme for you now.
Are you ready?
Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to introduce yourselves as you...
We're just bringing up the presentation.
Yeah.
If you could just bear with us
Oh,
for a
of
couple of
course,
seconds.
yes.
Thank you.
No problem.
Good evening, councillors.
Good evening.
My name is Mitesh Danak, and I'm from Highgate Care, and the applicant, and I'll be presenting with Neeraj Dixit, who's the planning consultant. We're basically going to talk about the development of the former Merrifield and Guild. A little bit about us.
Would it be possible to go full screen on that so it's a little bit larger?
I don't know how to do it. I'll try.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Full screen.
Do you need
full screen? Perhaps.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. About us, I have over 25 years experience in social care, both in elderly care provision as well as adult specialist care provisions. We operate 48 residential and supported living schemes nationally, including Priscilla Wakefield House, which is a 119-bedded nursing home in Haringey. We are an employer of over 1,200 people across the UK, and the jobs range from support workers, nurses, registered managers, as well as maintenance personnel, HR, finance roles as well. We have retained the services of DWA architects, an award-winning practice who have worked on over 450 care homes in the UK to design this scheme. Hand you over to Niraj now.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Niraj Dixit. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and the Planning Advisor to Mr. Danak and Highgate Care Limited. I'm a Director in D Planning and until recently was a Senior Director in CBRE's London Planning and Development team for 19 years. The site has frontages onto both North Hill in the northeastern corner of the slide and also to View Road in the southwestern corner, and the property also backs onto the rear gardens of Yatesman Road. North Hill is renowned to have a broad variety of architectural styles and ages, including a terrace of Grade 2 listed properties adjacent to the northeastern boundary of the site. View Road is more residential and suburban in character, but also displays architecture of different styles and ages, including number 3 View Road, which is the residence of the Tanzanian ambassador, to the southwest, which is a locally listed building. A care home has been on the site since 1930 and forms part of the character of the area. The Mary Fielding Guild provided accommodation and personal care to people over 65 who could maintain an independent lifestyle. It was akin to sheltered accommodation, but it didn't provide nursing care. The care home has 43 bedrooms, but the Guild made 2 attempts to deregister the care home from the CQC in September 2018 and March 2019. As can be seen from these images, the existing buildings do not meet the standards required of a modern care home. For example, the buildings are not suitable for people with mobility issues. The corridors are narrow and it's not possible for a wheelchair to pass in opposite directions. Access from the ground floor to the first floor is via a staircase or a lift, but the lift is too small to accommodate a wheelchair. The showers are small with no level access, and there's not a single working bath in the property. Although registered with the CQC for 43 bedrooms, in May 2021, there were only 16 residents, an occupancy of only 37%, and no new residents were admitted since 2018. Largely due to modern homes with better and more varied facilities close by, the home attracted little interest. By the Guild's own admission, the home had been operating at a loss for many years. In fact, £1.5 million loss in the last 4 years, and it was decided by the Guild to sell as it was financially unsustainable in its current form.
The closure of Mary Fielding Guild was a very sensitive issue which was widely covered in the local press. Knowing what we did know about the condition of the building and its financial non-viability, we immediately communicated our intentions to close the facility to staff and residents. The Highgate Care team held meetings within days of completion as we wanted to be as transparent and supportive as possible to staff and especially residents. It is always a difficult process to close a home, and we understand that moving can be distressing for residents and their families. That's why we worked closely with the individuals to manage the process and make it as easy as we could for them by providing adequate time and ongoing support. We undertook needs assessments to make sure residents were supported to find the right accommodation for them. This meant that many moved into care homes, which provide 24-hour nursing care, a much better fit for their health and care requirements. Within 5 days of taking over the site, nearly 40% of the residents had identified potential new homes with the support of our team. And all residents moved out into the new accommodation by the 7th of May. So effectively, in 8 weeks, all residents found alternative accommodation. It is important to understand that even if we had been able to refurbish the facility, the level of work required would mean residents would have had to move out to facilitate the works. This way, all residents have only had to move once, and are now living in the most appropriate accommodation for their own individual care needs.
We're committed to retaining a care use on this site, which has been established since the 1930s. We commissioned experts to assess the demand for care provision in this area. They concluded that there is good provision of traditional residential accommodation for elderly people, which amounts to some 27 care homes providing over 1,300 beds within a 3-mile radius, which is shown on the map on the right. And that also excludes a recent 116-bed additional care home on Bishop's Avenue, not very far away, and a further care home with 96 beds, which is due to open in the spring of 2023. But the experts did say that there's a strong demand for a nursing and convalescence home to assist people to recuperate from operations and increase their health span. A convalescence centre is a facility open to people of all ages that focused on providing an attractive and relaxing environment in which elderly residents can recuperate from serious operations, such as knee, hip, and potentially spine operations, with specialist staff and state-of-the-art equipment. The facilities we'll be providing is a nursing and convalescence home of 70 beds, focused around a new and improved, more welcoming entrance at View Road, together with a wellbeing and physiotherapy centre with a new and improved entrance at North Hill, and the two facilities are connected. The benefits that the proposal provide include continuation of care use on the site, providing a centre of excellence with state-of-the-art wellbeing facilities such as a hydrotherapy pool, making better use of this underutilised site and helping to provide for a larger number of people, creating up to 90 full-time equivalent employment opportunities, and replacing Truscott House on North Hill, which is identified as a negative feature. In addition to collaborative and cooperative discussions with officers of the Council over the last 12 months, we've engaged with key stakeholders, local residents, amenity groups, including the Highgate Society, CAC, local ward members, and QRP on 2 separate occasions over the last 5 months or so. We're shortly due to present to the Council's Development Management Forum at the end of this month, and will thereafter be looking to collate the application for submission in the autumn or winter of 2021. These images on this slide show the original proposal that was presented to the QRP at its meeting on the 18th of May. As you can see from the largest image on the left, it provides a contemporary form of architecture, taking some cues from the surrounding area. The building on View Road has a mansard roof with bedroom windows, and the building on North Hill has a uniform height and a uniform facade. And the image, hopefully in the right-hand corner, can see that the landscaping proposals for the garden area hadn't progressed very far. The QRP's response said that the scheme needed to better reflect the local context. The scale and massing was felt to be too large. The building footprint was asked to be reduced. They suggested a calmer, more coherent approach to the architecture needed to be adopted, and the external landscaping to be enhanced. In response to the QRP's comments, as shown on this slide, the scheme reported on the 18th of May is on the left, and the most recent scheme presented on the 25th of August is shown on the right. The two images are taken at slightly different angles. It's not deliberate, and it will be addressed in due course. However, it can be seen that the QRP comments have been taken on board. The overall height has been reduced by a story. The architecture is calmer and more coherent. The mansard roof has been replaced with a more traditional pitched roof, and the landscaping has been enhanced. This is another view of the building fronting View Road, but taken from the east looking west. North Hill, hopefully members can see the considerable change. The building has a reduced height with different materials, different colours. The fenestration has been deliberately kept more in keeping with the listed terrace on the right. And in the garden view, it can be seen that the bulk and the massing has been reduced, and the garden area landscaped, redeveloped and repurposed into a healing garden. These two elevations, again, the top image shows the scheme that was presented on the 18th of May and the second on the 25th of August. The red line is the outline of the existing buildings, and hopefully it can be seen that the mass and the bulk and the scale has been reduced in line with the QRP's comments. The QRP said that it was pleased that the applicant's intention is to retain the use of this important site for residential care accommodation. It accepts the massing and the density development of the proposals. It feels that the work done in response to the previous review has been very positive, and it commends the tenacity of the project team working with officers and consulting with the local community. It has asked for further work to be carried out on the roofscape internally and on North Hill, and that's work in progress. We have had community consultation and engagement with local residents, the Highgate Society, CAC, ward councillors, and a consultation leaflet has been delivered to over 2,000 households, including a consultation website having been established. This just shows a couple of images between the existing Kekewich House on View Road is existing and proposed, and with North Hill existing and proposed. And I'll leave you with this image of the building that's proposed fronting View Road. That's the end of the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or any queries you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ross, I saw you first.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that. On page 146, which is a plan of the site, just wondered how close the proposed building will be to the buildings on Yateman Road. Yateman Road is the sort of underneath where it says landscaping.
Thank you, Councillor. I do have another slide, if it would help the committee, that shows the distances from the existing property and the proposed property. Would that be helpful?
Sure. Show your slide, yeah.
So if members can see, and I apologise if it's a little blurred, but there's a green bold line that shows the footprint of the existing building. and the blue line is the proposed building footprint. So there are areas where we've deliberately tried to pull the proposed building away from sensitive boundaries and neighbouring properties. But there are some areas in the garden area where, in order to achieve a viable scheme and to accommodate the number of bedrooms and the facilities we require, that the building footprint has been extended. But Councillor, we've been very sensitive about the proximity of the existing buildings and also the proposed building.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yes, thank you. I had a question first for the planning department. Can I ask that, or now or not?
Sure.
Yes, so Mary Fielding Guild was a 42-bed residential care home, and many of the residents were actually from the borough, which was lovely, and I had elderly Highgate residents in there. This is a very different business model. This is a convalescent home, is my understanding. So when people come out of hospital and they need more care than they can get at home, they can come to this new home. My understanding is that it's a maximum stay of a couple of weeks, and then they head off home. So, I mean, this is a completely different business. This is not a residential care home. And I wanted to understand how this meets policy DM15, where it says proposals for development that would result in the loss of special needs housing will only be granted permission where it can be demonstrated that there's no longer an established local need for this type of accommodation. And I note that the applicant has made reference to some other care homes in the area, one being Bishop's Avenue, which is the one of the most expensive streets in the whole of London. So I'm not quite sure that that's going to be a care home that will be affordable for many people. So I was just trying to understand the justification for this complete change in use of the site. Care obviously has a very broad, it's a very broad word here. Yeah, that's it really. Thank you. And I had some questions for the applicant as well. Thank you.
So, okay, it's a policy question then.
Yes. Sorry. Yes, in terms of the policy position, it is about needs for specialist housing. So there is two types of specialist housing in play here: the existing and the proposed, and we would have to assess the need for the existing and the need for the proposed, and weigh those against one another in the decision. So it still would form a type of specialist housing, as you know, as set out, but we have to then weigh that against the loss of a care home and define whether that's acceptable in policy terms or not.
You said you had another question for the applicant.
Yes, I was just, it was on the design of the buildings, and I think that came through from the officer's introduction, and also quite a few of the QPR. There are obviously quite a lot of design comments. I mean, the building on North Road, I mean, it sits next to a row of lovely listed Georgian townhouses. And I mean, to be blunt, I'm not quite sure that the current utilitarian design is of the right architectural quality for this spot. And also the view road frontage, I can see it's trying to be sympathetic to the appearance of the street, but I would say that further work would need to be done to improve it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I think that was more a comment than a question, was it?
Oh, so yeah, so the question is, what further design work will you be doing?
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. If I could just say that in response to the current design, we have rigorously assessed the site and its surrounding context in planning, architectural and heritage terms. We've had extensive and very collaborative and cooperative discussions with officers under the framework of a PPA over the last year. There's been lots of differences of opinion with officers, and there's been, as has been highlighted, different views from local residents, amenity groups, and from the Highgate Society, CAC, and some local ward members. Planning is about a balance of those various interests and comments. Sometimes they'll be competing, sometimes they won't. But we feel that the current proposal is an appropriate design context to its surroundings and neighbouring properties. And officers and the independent QRP also feel that.
Okay, thank you.
But we are continuing to engage with the local community, and we are looking at further aspects which will be refinements and design progression.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the QRP report in the addendum, so from August, I was surprised that they advocated retaining the building that fronts onto North Hill. In fact, they even described it as architecturally elegant. I must say, having visited and also just look at the picture on page 141, I really fail to understand how they came to that view. But on the other hand, I have to say I wasn't over impressed with what you showed us in terms of the North Hill frontage. It didn't look particularly sort of exciting or complementary to the Georgian terrace. But this leads me to the wider issue about demolition of buildings, because in the agenda pack, there's a reference to the buildings that front onto View Road, which it says make a positive contribution to the character of the conservation area. And it says that it would need to be demonstrated that its retention had been thoroughly explored. I mean, maybe this is a question more for officers, but what is the position in terms of justifying demolition, whether it's of North Hill or View Road frontage? So what is the position on that? The other point I'd just raise is I did agree with the QRP where they criticised the location of the restaurant in the basement. I do think that a restaurant in some sort of care home is an opportunity for residents to get together and have some communal time. And if they're just looking out onto fairly bleak, whether it's a light well or what it is, I don't know. But so I would urge you to look at that layout in terms of having an appropriate view from communal facilities. Also in the packet, I note it says that a small number of rooms would be single aspect north facing. I just wondered if you could clarify how many on your current proposals, because it looked to me as though pretty much the windows away from View Road were more or less north facing, but maybe that's not quite the position. If you could just confirm the aspect of those windows, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Mitchell. So if I bring in Mr McKnocker on the demolition issue.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the building is a positive contributor to the conservation area. So a replacement building has to make an equal or better contribution to justify the test of preserving or enhancing the conservation area. Material considerations also come into play in terms of what the proposed development is and what that delivers. So we're really asking the applicant to show that they can't meet the specialist housing need through the existing building and justify the demolition through that, and then propose a building that's equal or better quality to it.
Okay, and applicant team, the
Thank you,
other
Chair.
questions, please.
Could I just please follow on from what Mr. McNaught has said regarding Kekowich House and the potential retention of other buildings on the site as well? In our very first pre-application meeting with officers, they did task us to whether we had actually explored the retention of not just one, but all of the existing buildings and whether they could be refurbished and repurposed. We investigated that in quite some detail and shared that information with officers. Regrettably, it didn't prove to be financially or otherwise practicable, and that was accepted by officers. You mentioned, Councillor, not liking the location of the restaurant and not making the best use of that aspect. I'll put my hands up and say we agree with you entirely. And in fact, we've now moved the restaurant to the ground floor, which overlooks the rear garden, which provides a very, very much more attractive aspect. And thirdly, regarding the north-facing windows, they are very limited in terms of number as a percentage. I don't know quite how many. I believe that the architects, DWA architects, are online and they may be able to help. But if not, we can certainly check and let you know.
And yeah, I just make it's 10 bedrooms that are north facing.
Next on the list, Councillor Corley Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Three, well, I suppose there are more points for when it comes to proper committee. The first one for the councillors, sorry, for the officers, is obviously it's different for us to have this sort of application come before us. So when we get the application, can we have perhaps a little bit more detailed information on the variations to a residential application, for example? Obviously, you don't have affordable home, limits and all that sort of thing, play space limits, all those sorts of things. But I assume there will still be certain limits on green space. There would still be SIL money, all those sorts of things. So perhaps we just need a little bit more background on this sort of one when it comes to proper committee. And then for the applicants, the QRP referred to the fact that we've declared a climate emergency here in Haringey. Obviously, you're probably not at the stage yet to go into the details, but this is a very large site that you have and quite a large development, and so it can have quite a major benefit or detriment to the ecology and obviously the air quality and climate and the area. So we would expect the very highest levels for when you do come forward. And for me personally, the more detail, the better in the application when it comes forward, rather than deferring it until a later stage. And then also, similarly, when you come forward with the application, it's quite a sensitive area. You mentioned there's a grade 2 listed building, I think, next door, and a locally listed building as well. I think, was it an embassy you said, or similar? So what I would like to see is when you do the CGIs or representations, that those details are included, that you have a wider shot that shows those in place so that we can properly see it in situ, rather than just the sort of the front on of the building, which is important, but obviously in this situation, it's important to see it in a wider context. They were really just points, I think.
Thanks. I don't think you need to come back on those points, do you? Is that all taken on board?
I'd be happy to, Chair, because I think they may actually benefit the councillor and other members of the committee, very briefly. Touching firstly upon sustainability and renewable energy, we're fully aware of the zero carbon requirement, and for BREEAM, very good, and Fabric First. And we have appointed sustainability and renewable energy consultants who've already engaged with the council's climate officer and have agreed a scope of works and information that's required to support the planning application. And we embrace those principles wholeheartedly. In terms of you are right, 109 North Hill, to the northeast of the site, is adjacent to our property, and it's part of a Georgian listed grade 2 terrace called Prospect Terrace. And Number 3 View Road, which borders the southwest corner of the site, is a locally listed building. It's actually a residential property. It's the residence of the Tanzanian ambassador. And with officers, we did walk around the site to identify which are the key opportunities, which are the key constraints, and identified important views. The information we shared with you today are computer-generated images, so they're not entirely accurate, but they do give a good portrayal. But we will be providing what are called actual visual representations to accompany the planning application, which will show everything physically accurate in terms of dimensions.
Great, thank you. Councillor Ibrahim.
Yes, that's better. So I wanted to follow up on the point that was made or was alluded to earlier, because I'm slightly concerned about the description of this as special needs housing, because it's clearly, I'm absolutely accept it's clearly a care facility, but in terms of the length of stay, in terms of the residents, would this meet the criteria to be described as special needs housing? So I'm slightly concerned about that.
Is that one for you or the? Yeah.
Councillor Ibrahim, you're absolutely right. This is a Class C2 residential institution use. So it is probably accurately described as a care facility rather than the former Mary Fielding Guild, which was more of a long-term residential home for the elderly. The proposed development is open to all, and it will be open to people for as long a stay as possible. But you are correct in that the demand and the need is focused on short-term stays designed on elderly people's recuperation.
So just to clarify, so therefore it's not, as described in 7.3, an expansion of special needs housing where it can be shown there is an established local need. It's essentially no longer special needs housing. It's a care facility.
I think that Mr. McNaughton may be able to comment on it, but
yes.
my view is policy DM15 is supportive of special needs housing, and this does meet a special need for residential accommodation.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, paragraph 7.3 is supports proposals for new and expanded. So expanded would mean extensions to existing buildings, things like that. So in this case, we're treating it as a new building, which would align with that. I suppose other examples of special needs housing that would fall into this would be hostels and accommodation like that, which again are for shorter stays, but those all come under the same umbrella of this same sort of use class and this policy.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Chair, may I just add another layer to that?
You may.
Because in the policy, there is a sub-criteria within paragraph 7.3 of the officer's report, which indicates the type of facilities that would deem it applicable to the policy. And that includes, quote, the level of supervision, management and care and support. And that's the type of facility and support that we will be providing.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Councillor Peacock.
Well, I'm hoping that you can hear me because I might be saying something controversial. First of all, can I just say I'm an older person, I'm not elderly, and I do object to the term elderly. So perhaps you could take that on board.
I will. Thank you, Councillor.
I'm also for the council, I'm the older people's champion. So again, I'm not the elderly people's champion. Okay. Now, my interest is obviously in the older people And I've attended Priscilla Wakefield. You mentioned it earlier on, and I actually named the building as the Priscilla Wakefield House. And the bedrooms there are quite small, and it's very difficult to see on the maps here how large or small the bedrooms are. But one thing that I do commend in the Priscilla Wakefield House is there's a communal lounge on each floor. Now, it's very difficult to see on these plans whether there is a breakout area for people to go to, because not everybody wants to go into a restaurant. They want to come out of their room and go spend some time perhaps chatting with other people from other rooms. So I don't know if you could point that out to me if there's anything like that. I also, I don't know if you've ever been to Prothero House or Lorenco House, which is an extra care home, but they also have very wide corridors to make it easier for people to go along with wheelchairs and stuff like that. But they also have breakout areas on each level. And a person who's in a wheelchair or relying on somebody else to assist them to get into another room, it's much better to have it on the level that they're on than have to go down to the ground floor, even if there is a lift, to go on the ground floor to the restaurant, which I'm assuming they have to pay for the food once they get there. So perhaps you can take...
Are you able to address those concerns?
Yes,
Thanks.
we've actually got slides which show you the layouts in the, if you would like to see them. But each floor will have a communal area with dining, etc., available on each floor. So yes, we will be accommodating that.
Okay, because it's hard to see on in the maps
Well, we've got floor layouts if you want to see them now.
I think we're okay for that right now, because I'm just a bit concerned about time. I think we can take your word for it.
Well, and you know, the internal layout is still being refined a bit on the back of the latest the QRP. Okay. So, but we'll certainly, you know, make sure that that's the case.
And will each room be have ensuite, or is there separate bathrooms?
All the bedrooms.
All ensuite facilities.
All ensuite, because again, I've noticed in some of these homes they have a special bathroom with an adjustable bath. Because not everybody, I mean, I can't, for instance, get into a bath anymore, but the bath is adjustable height and tip and all the rest of it. Is that accommodated here as well?
Yes, there will be facilities like that.
Thank you.
And Chair, can I just specifically address the Vice Chair's comment about room sizes?
Yes.
In the existing Mary Fielding Guild, the room sizes are typically 10 to 12 metres squared. In the current proposal, they're in excess of 20 square metres, so double the size.
Excellent.
And some are even larger.
Well done.
Thank you. And there aren't any more questions or comments, so thank you very much.
Chair, I think
there is
from Councillor
Oh,
Morris.
sorry, I didn't see you there.
Thank you, Chair. Just two very quick ones. One is, I think if I've understood correctly, the staff accommodation is going to be in the basement internally. Is that where the staff will be sleeping, or is that a staff common room? If they were sleeping there, I'd be slightly concerned that they were sleeping in windowless rooms. And my last question was, how much is it going to cost to stay there? What sort of prices will you be charging? Will it be daily prices?
Sure.
Weekly prices?
The staff won't be sleeping in rooms without windows. We are trying to create a state-of-the-art facility, and the staff are at the centre of what we'll be doing. So we won't be putting them in such accommodation. And that's just like a restroom area. And in fact, we're even looking to reconfigure the layout so that may move upstairs. In terms of the charges, we haven't quite determined that yet. Obviously, it's going to take a bit more time before we get to build it, etc. But we envisage the cost to be in the region of about £300 per night.
Thank you.
I think that is the end of comments or questions. So thank you very much for coming to present to us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
you for your time.
Nursing care. We don't have more.
Chair, could we have a 5-minute comfort break, please?
Yes. Can we make it? Can we be back at 9:25, please? Is that okay?
will make much more money for them than the care home. And that's why they want much more. And I think, he's got to look at it. My guess is that it would be more. And it's going to be super posh. It's going to be a barbers, hairdressers, a beauty salon, a swimming pool. Yeah, but it's not. I mean, it's convalescent. It's basically come out of hospital instead of going home and your elderly husband look after your wife or your kids. You go there. And then you go home. So, we wanted another care home there. And in fact, they said, no, we would just to run a care home. But this is completely different. It's not a residential care. We don't look at this one actually.
How much?
But it's already done. Not going to finish before 10
Yeah, what we're trying to do. That's right, yeah. It's just it's not as it's not as sort of indicated. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's good. I mean, yeah. Yeah, same thing you said.
So,
same thing. Yeah.
Hello? Oh,
No, I mean, yeah.
hello?
Quite a few, but I get it. I want to make sure they're on board.
I have the speakers gone off.
Shall I just join in then?
I'd like to restart.
Computer?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's me.
Again?
It's me.
Oh, there we are. Welcome back. So item number 11, we have the pre-application on Arundel Court and Baldwin Court on Lansdowne Road, pages 147. And this is to deliver 32 homes in 5 buildings fronting Lansdowne Road. And we have Quaker, Osman, Lara, to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
She's just going to put up the.
Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Is that you?
That was me. Sorry.
Take it off then. Just in case, because I think it don't
Hello. Thank you.
Might have a name. I don't know.
I think Osman Jamila, one of the. I don't think so. Proposal for Arundel Court and Baldwin Court, a three-storey block of flats directly facing each other along Lansdowne Road. Proposal 6. We can't rooms in 5 blocks fronting Lansdowne Road. As member will be aware, we have been to quality review below, and our certain that the feedback is contained within the agenda which my understanding that the budget team we are working through the PRP points alongside the points raised tonight to ensure that we can deliver good quality residential council rent. I will pass you on to our architect to give us a brief on the site. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to introduce yourself and the report.
Good evening. My name is Dominic Gilby from BPTW Architects.
Martin Cowie, Planning Advisor to the Housing Delivery Team.
Shall I begin? Yes.
Yes, please.
So we've been asked to look into 4 possible sites within the Haringey area. This tonight will be for Arundel and Baldwin Court, as you can see, either side of Lansdowne Road. There's 2 other sites, as I touched upon, which we've been asked to consider in another application, which is Fisk Court and Ashtown Court. So we're looking at 4 buildings for the London Borough of Haringey. And overall, at the moment, we're looking at 18 new dwellings on Arundel Court and 12 on Baldwin Court. So if I move down, I'll just take you through some site photos within the area. This view here is of Arundel Court, as you can see in the bottom corner of the site. This gives you an indication and an idea of this long brick wall that runs along the entire site. And you can see the gable end of one of the existing buildings, which has got very small slot, non-habitable windows. The image below is the entrance into Arundel Court, and you can see the number of existing dwellings within there. Number 3 is an image looking towards a substation, which is inside the site. You can see as well near the entrances there are existing pram sheds, which are used for storing items which residents cannot get within their dwelling. Number 4 gives you an indication of, again, a bit of a closer view of the pram sheds, as well as one of the existing entrances into the flat block. Image 5 gives you an indication of the existing garages that are on the site, and also the refuse point where existing residents are taking the refuse. And number 6 again gives you an indication of the brick wall that's running along the entire width of the site, and the existing dwelling number 39 Lansdowne Road. And you can see on the edge there that the garage that's located within the site. And then I'll just move through Baldwin Court images as well. As I touched upon, that brick wall that runs the entire width of Arundel also does the same for Baldwin Court. So at the back of this, there are existing garages, and you can also see on one of the gable end flat blocks these non-habitable windows to bathrooms and kitchens. Number 2 is a view into the site on Baldwin Court. Again, very similar to Arundel Court, you can see the existing pram sheds for existing residents. Number 3, a closer look at the gable end flat block with the non-habitable windows, the existing garages to the right hand side. And then number 4 is a view of the central courtyard space, which is a green space with existing refuse collection points on either corner. Number 5 gives you a view again of the garages and the existing parking arrangement across the site, and again on another block the non-habitable windows. And number 6 gives you an indication of the neighbouring building, but also again you can see the brick wall that's running across the entire width of the site. Number 1 gives you an image from within the conservation area. You can see that these large trees kind of indicate where the edge of the site begins, So the view is relatively small and slightly restricted from within the conservation area. And this second image gives you a view west down towards the two sites. So this here is the existing garage that I touched upon earlier with the neighbouring property number 39. So if I briefly move through the existing site conditions, you've got a number of site constraints within the site. Perhaps the most severe is the gas pipe that runs around in this area with the gas easement zone with that. The blue indicates the parking provision within the sites, the brown, the garages, and the dark blue, as you can see here, the refuse collection points. We've also indicated in pink the existing pram sheds and in red the existing entrances into the existing flat blocks. So from that, we've looked at key design opportunities, such as the building footprint, where that can be located, and how that sits along the site. We've looked at enhancing the existing landscape for the existing residents. Where possible, we've indicated where the gable ends have either non-habitable windows or are blank. So we've used that as an opportunity in which to locate perhaps a building in this area. The fourth image gives you an idea of the heights within the area. So there's 3-storey elements within the existing flat blocks onto either side of the site, apart from here, which is Burlington House, which is 4 stories. And we've also looked at this as an opportunity to provide a new urban edge to Lansdowne Road and some soft landscaping to the street front as well. And also the indication of trying to provide a new pedestrian and vehicle entrance into the site, but trying to enhance that. So in terms of massing and site, the initial view was to see with these yellow side flank walls, that there's an opportunity there to perhaps locate buildings in this area. We looked at the second step was to look at the massing, where we can locate this. Number 3 is trying to make these blocks permeable for existing and proposed residents as well into the spaces behind. Number 4 gives you an idea of locating that within the jelly mode, which the daylight and sunlight consultant provided. You can see in this area, we've based this upon a 3-storey height for the proposed building, which is the orange blocks. The yellow gives you an idea of where the height could be increased to, but having reviewed this, we felt 3 stories is a soft approach, but a well kind of balanced approach to the existing site. And then from that, we've kind of chamfered the edges to provide first floor amenity spaces, and again provide a gap between 2 blocks to provide a green courtyard space to the rear, which I'll move on to shortly. And the 2 sketches at the bottom give you an indication of the massing that would be proposed along Lansdowne Road. So just to start off with the proposals, you can see here, this is where we currently are. You can see that how the proposal fits into the existing landscape and the existing dwellings in the surrounding area. You can see the collection of the refuse points, which I'll move on to, and also how we've tried to enhance as much as we can, all part of trying to give something back to the existing residents. So we'll move on to the ground floor plan. Currently, we've looked at providing refuse for the existing residents in 1, 2 locations for Arundel Court. Equally, we've, as I touched upon, trying to enhance the landscape, which I'll move on to shortly. We've looked at providing cycle storage for existing residents as well as a play area in the top corner, and also community areas for grow your own planters, something that we feel that the existing residents could really get behind. And also, as I touched upon, in Arundel Court, you've got this nice green space here, which the existing residents would benefit from. On Baldwin Court, you've got an already existing green space, which we'd like to enhance much more if we can. You've got new existing refuse stores. You've got new refuse stores for existing residents, and also again the cycle parking spaces for the existing residents. The first floor plan, we move up, and I just moved up 1 step. Along the ground floor, there'll be 1-bed, 2-person units with 3 2-bed, 3-person wheelchair dwellings being proposed. On the upper floors, there will be 2-bedroom, 4-person apartments for people. As I touched upon, you've got an amenity space on the edge of each of these buildings here for the residents. And as I move up onto the second floor, this then turns into a balcony on the corners. And as part of the sustainability approach, we've been looking at air source heat pumps and PV panels, which would be located on the roof for the proposed flat blocks. In terms of the flat layouts, we've got a variety of different types, but generally 2-bed, 4-person dwellings, as you can see here. 2-bed, 3-person wheelchair dwelling, which is located in 2 in Arundel and 1 in Baldwin Court. And 1-bed, 2-person dwellings on the ground floor. As you can see here, we've looked at providing projecting bay windows. The reason for this inclusion is because of the restricted site and the proximity of the existing residential dwellings within the site. If we move on to the landscape plan from the landscape architect, you can see there is a recent addition to the site, which is a new play space for the existing residents, with play equipment proposed for children 0 to 4 years old, a community orchard, and where possible in the darker shades of green, you'll see where we're proposing enhanced landscaping for the site. And as I touched upon, the existing residents will get new refuse stores, which are landscaped, so they settle in within the new landscape proposed across the site. On Baldwin Court, you've got the proposal of a new play area here to the south of the site, better seating areas for residents to sit down and have discussions with each other, and the proposal of an outdoor gym with small gym stations to, again, try and give something back to the existing residents. And in the central area, we've looked at perhaps breaking down this green space and providing new planters for existing residents. In terms of sustainability, we work closely with the energy consultant. As you can see from this graph here, we're providing 72% reduction in carbon dioxide against the Part L regulations 2013. As per the ERs we've received from London Borough of Haringey, there is a requirement to achieve an energy efficiency of 10%. We're currently at 20%, which is obviously an improvement on those requirements. And in terms of the heating arrangement for the houses, that's where, as I touched upon earlier, we've got the air source heat pumps for each individual dwelling. As I move through, you can see here some additional elements we've had to consider alongside well-proportioned windows to ensure there's no overheating into the individual flats. We've also looked at pre-solays being added to the south of the buildings to ensure there's no overheating, and that's to take into consideration any future changes in the weather data. We've also proposed balconies where, rather than a vertical angle, we've looked instead at rotating the angles of the balcony by 45 degrees to try and block and shield any view from the street floor up into the balconies. You can see as well, as I touched upon, the PVs and the air source heat pumps on the roofs. And also, as I touched upon briefly before, we've looked at providing projecting bay windows. So where in Arundel Court, where we have bedroom windows that face onto the existing dwelling, we've looked at providing an angled bay window, which is to provide the resident with a view away from the blank wall. This is a view taken from Baldwin Court looking towards Arundel Court. Again, you can see, as I touched upon, the brise-soleils here. We've also looked at providing buffer spaces to the existing, to the proposed buildings. That's to make a softer edge along Lansdowne Road, but also to set back the buildings from what is quite a noisy road. And you can see here on the first floor where you've got the amenity space for the first floor dwelling, and also on the second floor you've got this balcony that wraps around that provides much more interest to the facade. In terms of the appearance, as I touched upon, you've got the balconies on the second floor that wrap around, rather than being on the main elevation. It feels quite heavy, which I'll show you shortly in the elevations. You can see here there's a dashed line to indicate where an existing party wall is. But again, The brick selection, we've looked at a mixed brick selection, which is to take into account the properties in the surrounding area. We felt like this mix of brick provides interest along the site. And to complement that, we've looked at a softer red brick, again, just allowing the mix of the brick for this particular block to sort of have a strong language, but complements, again, the other blocks that we're proposing in terms of the contrast of the brick. The material palette, as I touched upon, this particular type of brick, the beamish blend, gives an opportunity to pick up the different colours within the existing site, but also neighbouring sites, and a softer red mixed brick. Again, we felt, you'll see shortly in the elevation, that this particular brick was a bit too much. As you can see here, as I touched upon, you've got a really nice kind of mixed brick, provides a new identity for Arundel Court facing onto Lansdowne Road. And again, this red brick sort of complements that with similar bronze, copper, laser cut panels, which we've provided or proposed at the moment onto the front facades. Baldwin Court, again, very similar in its language, very simple, with the intention to try and make sure that our sustainability approach, a fabric first approach, is sufficient. You can see as well where we've got entrances into the ground floor dwellings. They've been
You can hear, that's your time,
okay,
I'm afraid. Thank you.
I was at the end, yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Members, given the time now, if we can make our questions as concise as possible, that'd be great. We have Councillor Peacock wanted the first one, then I'll come to this.
No.
It is?
Yes,
it's on now.
Yeah.
I actually live at the rear of Arundel Court, so I know the area extremely well. And if you go down Lansdowne Road, you'll see that there are other blocks there that have got flats built on top. And I just wondered what the brief was that you were handed by the council to work to, whether you're not considering putting another layer on all the blocks, would you have had less of an impact on the actual flats that are there now, because they're going to lose garage space and all sorts of things. I mean, I like the landscaping that you're proposing, all the rest of it, but I would have liked personally to have seen the blocks, existing blocks, have another block on top, another floor on top, which would have given us all the 30 flats that you're talking about, and it would have had less impact on the area and it not make it so crowded. So I just wondered what the brief was that the council gave you, and did you not even think about possibly raising it up instead of building it separately? I'd be interested to know what you think about it.
Well, that wasn't actually provided to us as part of the brief. The brief wasn't for that. I'm assuming that's because of cost implications and carrying out those works with existing residents within the building. That's just, as I said, it wasn't part of the brief we were asked to look at some of the council land within some of these sites, and how we could provide a kind of council dwellings effectively. But yeah, sorry, the setback, or sorry, the additional floor wasn't really part of the brief. So.
Okay, hang on. Yeah, there are. So the question about Manson, was that a consideration? I think, do you want to come in, Mr. McRory, on that?
It was mooted by, I think it was one of the members possibly, but again, that wasn't really part of the brief. Our brief wasn't to look at providing an additional story to the existing dwellings. It was purely to provide new buildings within the car park garage areas of each of the sites.
Mr. Cowie, I muddled up your name. Mr. McNaughton was on earlier. Sorry about that.
This doesn't work, but I'm sure you can hear me. No, the building over existing council blocks has certainly been something the Housing Department has considered as part of the programme. But given, as Dominic alludes to, the cost implications, funding arrangements, and the complications with existing residents, tenants and leaseholders, this is something that does not form part of our current programme, but it is something that the housing department has still been considering as a possible option longer term. Okay. The brief was very specific about delivering new homes on new council-owned sites, and hence why we're presenting sort of these initial proposals to you tonight.
Okay.
But certainly thank you for raising that, because it still remains an issue for the housing department to consider.
Thanks. Thanks. I've got Councillor Rice next.
Thanks. The issue here is something that hasn't been addressed by the officer or the architect, and that is what's being suggested is that you get rid of all these car parks. There are 4 car parks. There's Frith, there's Arundel, there's Ashdown, and there's Baldwin. All in the same area. And the suggestion is that you get rid of all these car parks, so you build flats on it. Fair enough. Where are the people going to park their cars? I mean, you've got a 63,000 seater stadium, almost on a weekly basis operational. Some people come by car, some people don't. But I asked an officer this at some other discussion we had, and he suggested that they park them in the road. Well, there's no place to park it in the road. You can't park in Lansdowne Road. You get towed away, right? You can't get down the side street like Tilson and Spencer and Wickham and so on. You can't get down those side streets. They're parked cheek by jowl, there and there. Take a trip down to Lansdowne Road when the meeting is finished. Hop on a bus and go down, see what the parking is this time of night. We need a proper discussion, not in this forum, but elsewhere, to address this issue. And the issue is getting rid of all car parks and building flats on it.
There has been a parking assessment, so I'm going to bring Mr.
We have done a comprehensive parking stress survey, including a transport
I can't hear you. What did you say?
Parking stress survey. We have done quite a comprehensive one, and the indication is that there still will be capacity within the surrounding area to accommodate some of these parking. But the loss, we are not totally losing all the car parking space. We are still providing enough. I mean, in terms of Arundel, we are providing 18. Baldwin, we are providing 13. But there's a loss.
Where are you going to provide these spaces? You're building on the car park, my friend. You don't build on the car park and then you provide again.
Okay.
That's what you're doing. You're building on the car park.
All right, let the officer answer the question.
The parking stress survey clearly justify that there will be clearly an impact on the street, but it will not be so significant that we won't be able to accommodate them within the surrounding area.
You can't park in the road.
Hang on. It's not a conversation. Yeah. I think it'd be helpful if we could say how many car parking places are going to be lost, how many car parking places. And,
In terms of Arundel, we are losing 18 spaces, but we are losing 15 spaces where we are gaining 18. And then for Baldwin, we are losing 17, and then we are gaining 13 spaces.
From where?
Yeah.
So overall, how many are lost and how many are gained?
There's no overall in it. There's not the space available. You're talking about going.
Yeah. Hang on. It's not just. We're actually trying to get some proper answers, because it's as far as I understand it, it's pram sheds and garages that are being knocked down, not car parking spaces. So hold on.
We are losing 33 spaces, and then we are gaining 28 spaces.
So we lose 5.
Yeah.
Five spaces.
Five spaces.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks.
Can I? Sorry, I think there was some misunderstanding there with the parking numbers. I can confirm. So in Arundel Court, there's 33 spaces. Yes. We'll be retaining 18. In Baldwin Court, there's 30 spaces. We'll be retaining 13.
So what's the net loss of car parking spaces?
15 on Arundel, 17 on Baldwin.
That's the efficient space.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. This is the second application we've had tonight from the council where it's just 1 and 2 bed units, no family units tonight at all. Now, it does say that we have to think about the wider context of, applications being brought forward and et cetera, but there are only 1 and 2 beds being brought forward. So why is that on this application? I'm wondering what you're going to look at doing about all of the little courtyards that are being created here, which potentially could be sources of ASB, loitering and that sort of thing, because it does create quite a lot of dark areas from what I can tell. I'd be quite interested in what the tenure mix is of the current site, whether it's still predominantly council homes or the units have become under right to buy private homes, or whether there's a lot of rentals. And I guess this is council policy, but we're not bringing forward any mixed tenure anymore. We're just bringing forward sites that are developing council homes. And there's a lot of evidence that mixed tenure brings a lot of benefits to communities, but also there's a lot of people that won't be eligible for council homes that we seem to now be excluding as a council from even living in the borough unless they can afford some of the very high prices here. So I guess this is for officers, has the council completely ditched intermediate homes and all the other offerings that are part of London and the Mayor of London's plans, and is it solely council homes that we're only going to get coming forward? And then in the QRP summary, on the design, it says, local authority schemes should be exemplars to set the standard for private schemes within the borough. This is 5 boxes shoved on the side of the road, creating a corridor. It couldn't be further from being an exemplar. I mean, needless to say, I'm not a fan of New London design as it is, as you know, Martin, but I mean, this really is as far from being an exemplar as could possibly be imagined. And we have an opportunity here, if the council is building homes, to build something that is going to stand the test of time, which this design won't, and will lead to Haringey being a real design borough. And I would suggest that you have a look at, if you go down to the bottom of Brownlow Road from Bounds Green Station onto the North Circular, turn right, and on the left-hand side, there is pretty much this row of buildings along the side of the North Circular, and it is absolutely horrendous. It looks like a big brick wall. In fact, they've had to build a new wall halfway going up of it because of visibility issues. I really would say this design, needs something to be completely different, to be quite honest. Well, yeah, that's it. Probably the questions are more for Robbie and the officers, I think. Thanks.
Where to start with response?
In terms of a smaller unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it actually, in this case, would be helpful to hear from the applicant team about the programme and the mix of units across that, and the mix of tenures that could potentially come forward, and just what they're doing to ensure that this is top-notch design and stands the test of time.
Thank you, Robbie, Chair. Thank you, councillors. So just first, in relation to your latter point around, I think, sort of, tenure and the approach to, delivering affordable rented homes as part of its programme. The funding that we have in place from the Mayor of London is to deliver new council affordable rented property. So that is the basis for why we have identified the sites that we have in our ownership to seek to optimise the number, but also the variety of typologies to cater for, clearly our growing housing need. Some sites, such as Arundel and Baldwin, are better suited for smaller units on the basis that they are constrained. Okay, they are in reasonably accessible locations. And we appreciate that clearly there is issues in relation to sort of parking need and demand that we need to manage carefully. On other schemes, we'll be seeking to deliver larger family units, again as part of meeting that wider housing need. It just so happens that tonight, yes, we have presented 2 schemes that solely sort of provide for 1s and 2 beds. There are, however, two other sites nearby, for instance, that Dominic referred to earlier, known as Fisk Court and Ashdown Court, where we are seeking to provide family homes, albeit sort of on a much smaller scale, but that is just indicative of the nature of the types of schemes that we are seeking to deliver affordable rented homes. There will be more that we bring to this committee, both in terms of pre-committee briefing and planning applications, which do provide predominantly for larger family homes, 3 beds and 4 bedroom units. So we are seeking to both optimise the number, but also provide a spread of unit types to meet that housing need. I mean, I think it's worth just pointing out, and Dominic can just mention something here. We did look to provide family homes on Arundel and Baldwin, but because we are looking at a fairly narrow strip of land fronting Lansdowne Road against the backs of this sort of existing blocks, it's extremely difficult to ensure that we get the sort of adequate space standards that we need to meet your policy. So instead, we sought to ensure that the smaller units that we're providing are generous, very usable, and sort of are presented with sort of very high quality amenity. These are plans that are work in progress. As you note, we've just recently had a QRP, and we are seeking very much to sort of consider and address the points that are raised with your planning officers. And that's something we will do, taking account, of course, your comments this evening. Just to touch upon sort of other points that you've raised, Councillor, the existing estates are predominantly still council rented. There are a number of leasehold properties, but the vast majority are still in council ownership. We're looking very carefully at not only how we deliver these new dwellings on the Lansdowne frontage to present a new Lansdowne Road, but we're looking very much carefully at how we can enhance the external spaces and amenities of the existing estates. So we're looking at a very comprehensive landscaping strategy that provides for example, new landscaping, play space, breakout space, areas for relaxation, new planting, new trees, new bike stores for existing residents, as well as new pram sheds and refuse and recycling stores. So we're not just thinking about the bricks and mortar of the new build, we're thinking about how we can place shape and enhance the condition of the existing estates. Okay, very much obviously focusing on the external areas, because Homes of Haringey, as you know, have programme of upgrading works over the course of the next 2-3 years for these estates. So as part of sort of looking at those courtyards, we want to ensure that clearly they are safe, they are well overlooked, and they will be much better overlooked. They will be better landscaped so that they will be more attractive for existing residents to use, because at the minute they're just green swathes of grassland. And we are liaising very, very closely, as we obviously would do as a council, with the Secure by Design officer at the Metropolitan Police, who has reviewed these initial proposals and has said that he feels that sort of if we carry on in this vein, that we are potentially looking at sort of achieving a gold rated accreditation for Secure by Design. So we are very much striving to achieve high quality here, because we have to. We are delivering your agenda. As a council, we need to be leading by example. So QRP are quite right to highlight this. And that is really very much our key objective in bringing forward sort of new council homes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Cowie, that's great. As we all know, it's now past 10 o'clock, so we'll only finish this item. We won't go on to any further items on the menu tonight. Councillor Mitchell, were you indicating? Yeah.
Well, given the time, I'll just mention 2 quick points then. When I looked at the page 158 of the agenda pack, it just seemed to me that some of the windows in the proposed blocks looked directly onto the gable end of existing blocks, and the QRP seems to confirm that that is the case, or certainly as far as Arundel Court is concerned. And it talks about some bedrooms being only 2.5 metres away from the blank gable walls. So clearly that needs to be looked at. The other point I picked up from the QRP was that they recommended looking at having lifts in these blocks so that it provides for sort of long-term occupation by tenants should their mobility change over time. So is that something that could be looked at? It seems to have a lot of merit in terms of otherwise requiring people to have to move again should they need to. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Very, very helpful points. You picked up on what QRP have been concerned about. Fortunately, the gable ends of those existing blocks don't contain any habitable room windows. They're effectively slot windows that serve hallways. So in that respect, we're quite fortunate. Now, we do know we need to seek to address that proximity issue in respect to the proposed windows against that flank wall. We have tried to currently sort of place them so that there is sufficient outlook, each side of the existing block. But as QRP have picked up, there may be room for improvement in the sense that we may be able to shift the blocks along so that there's sort of there's a better relationship. That's certainly something we will look at. In respect to lifts, it's an incredibly important sort of issue as part of our council's housing delivery programme, as you can imagine. Lifts, however, are extremely expensive and costly to maintain longer term. You tend to require a certain number of units per block, per core to make it sort of viable longer term. And in this instance, we're looking at sort of relatively small buildings, 3 stories, containing max 6 units in each. And so it simply wouldn't be viable to sort of provide a lift and ensure it was sort of, I suppose, maintainable longer term. And hence another reason why we've also sought to provide smaller units, because we appreciate clearly with larger family units, and yes, lifts are preferable. We have considered lifts in this instance. We are providing lifts on other council schemes. We just so have happened to look carefully on this site, looked at the space requirements, looked at the costs, and we consider that in this instance, it's not strictly necessary, but it's certainly something that we are taking very seriously on every council scheme that we bring forward, yeah.
Thanks. Any further questions from anybody? Councillor Colley-Harrison.
Just on that point, if lifts aren't possible and there are only 3-storey units, could they not be 3-storey townhouses, family townhouses?
Very good point. Yeah. Now, if we were to introduce townhouses as a replacement for sort of these blocks, we simply wouldn't achieve the numbers that we would sort of clearly prefer to obviously meet that agenda, that is to deliver clearly as an optimal number of affordable rented units to meet housing demand. It simply comes down to that. We are delivering townhouses on other sites, and so we are trying to look very carefully across the programme what sites are more suited to smaller units and a larger number of homes, and what sites are better suited for family units and fewer homes. We're trying to strike a balance across all our sites to achieve, the numbers and make, effective use of council land and public funding. So we could look at houses just on these 2 sites, but it simply wouldn't yield the numbers that I think that we, ideally, as a housing team, would like to deliver. But I do take your point, and you'll see other sites that we bring forward which deliver just houses.
Thanks. I can't see any other indications. So, as you know, the meeting must end at this item. So, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.